How do we know what we know about turfgrass science? Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology.
Good evening, everyone. This is welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. Today, I'm Luciana Shaddix. I am the wife, and I'm here to interview and ask some questions, have a conversation with Travis about journals and how we define good science, good journals, bad journals, how science is published out there. And I'm excited about this topic, I have to say. I told him I want a topic that I like, and this is something I really like. My world is dentistry and gum disease, but I am an associate editor for the Journal of Periodontology, which was one of the most important journals for us. And so this topic is dear to my heart. So I'm very happy to be here. How are you, Travis?
I'm doing good. I was teaching Lisa how to throw a baseball, and I hit
Yes.
my daughter in the face with a soft baseball and busted her lip, but she got back up and started throwing the ball. So she just started throwing the ball. So I've been doing that all week, the last couple of days anyway. But what I was saying when the microphone was off is you're also traveling a lot, and so I've been home a lot, and now we're switching, where your schedule is now slowing down a little bit, and my schedule for speaking is speeding up. So for the next couple of weeks, I'll be gone. But tonight we're here, and then for the next couple of weeks, there'll be a little bit of a gap, and then we'll be, for the most part, a large portion of our speaking at the times will be done, and then it'll be the holiday season. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be good. So I'm very happy to be here today. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be sharing this episode with you on a topic, like I said, I like very much. So let's get on to it. So how do you feel? How do you all feel about scientific journals? Let's talk about it. What exactly is a scientific journal, and what role does it play for the end user out there, for us researchers in the process of generating and communicating knowledge?
Yeah. So as the longtime viewers of this channel know, that's the majority of my content that I go over is scientific literature and scientific papers. And so what are they, and why are they important? Well, what they are essentially is a means for scientists to communicate and to evaluate and to critique other work, and as well as your own work, and get it published and to get it out to the broader scientific community as well as the general public, so that the information can be used. And what I would argue to be the end goal would be to enhance human well-being. Think about it like we talk about nitrogen leaching, or we talk about dental probing, or we talk about heart disease, or whatever the case is. Oftentimes I wonder, like, who cares? What does it matter? Well, why it matters is it has to benefit human well-being in some way or the other. So when I'm talking about nitrogen leaching, the reason that's important is because somewhere down the road, it's been related to or correlated to a harmful effect to human well-being, or it's a loss of economic growth to humans, and in turn have an impact on their well-being. So that's what journals do. They allow us to communicate the science, and hopefully in a formal way, to other scientists and to stakeholders. Nowadays, it serves a little bit of a different role than it originally did, but ultimately that's what they're there for.
That's a very good point, because I'm in healthcare, right? So we generate science. We would like to say that we practice dentistry or practice medicine based on evidence. And so when you say human well-being, that is right on point for us too in health science. We hope to generate good science so that we can treat our patients better. So very good point on that. But how historically, let's talk about peer review. How did the idea of peer review develop, right? Or referee publishing develop, and why did we need it?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'll admit I'm not a well-versed scholar on this specific issue of historic scholarship or historic publishing, but it's my understanding that it's a little bit like what's going on today with information with YouTube and social media. There's so much information that gets thrown out there that some of it is true, granted, but a lot of it's not true. And that same thing existed way back in the 1600s. So when we were coming out of the Enlightenment period, when we had a large growth, we were coming out of the Dark Ages, and we had this Enlightenment period. A lot of scholars started thinking, and we have started to have some progress in the scientific world. There was most of that information was communicated in letters or word of mouth or through reputation or through lectures or whatever the case might be. There weren't journals per se. There wasn't a means to formally extend that information to others. So we communicated that through word of mouth and through letters, which is a lot of the ways that some of the the holy books were written, particularly the Bible. The Bible no one sat down and wrote the Bible. It's a series of what was at one point letters in oral tradition that were then at some time transcribed and translated into what's now the Bible. Well, before then, it was just words and letters and word of mouth. Well, the same thing happened in science. A lot of that was just word of mouth, and a lot of it was just letters. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Royal Society of London that sat down and actually started the first journal, if you want to call it that, back in the 1600s. I want to say, someone can look it up and put it in the chat. You guys probably know or can help me out. I think it was something like 1665. There was a journal that the Royal Society of London started printing. And that's what started the journal process. Well, what happened back then when they were communicating this information was that a lot of other people were also just throwing information out there, just like they do today on YouTube. So, for example, a scientist might be publishing in the Royal Society of London's publication actual evidence, actual science. Well, somebody else might be talking about leeches leeching their blood, or holy stones or seer stones or crystals, removing the Black Plague or whatever the case might be. There was a lot of misinformation even in the 1600s, okay? Mm-hmm. So the Royal Society of London recognized this, or the scientists, I should say, recognized this. And so they started trying to figure out a way to find scholars or specialists in a particular area to critique the information. What were at that time referees? That's what they weren't. They weren't called referees, but that's what they were. They were seeking other specialists or experts to determine whether or not this information was actually accurate. And that's what started the referee process and the peer review process back in the 1600s. Because even then, there were like a lot of information is coming out. Some of it's true, some of it's not true. How are we going to vet this? How are we going to have any confidence that what we're saying is accurate? Well, they self-imposed a referee process that we know of today as a referee process anyway.
I don't think it's very much different than today, is it?
No, not really.
A lot of stuff coming out there, and not all of them is good, and not all of them good information. So maybe we should instigate come up with a peer review process for
YouTube, for social media. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Twitter and Facebook.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's really crazy. It's a double-edged sword because there's so much good that can come from social media, but it's just saturated by just a plethora of nonsense. And so the question becomes, how does the average person, the general public, know what's true and not true? It really is difficult. And that's the same thing that happened back then. That's the reason it exists today is because the same thing happened back then. And they through the peer review process, they have figured out that at least currently, it's the best process we have. It's not perfect. It's definitely flawed, as we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about why it's flawed and how it becomes flawed. But it's the best process we have to critique the information and to filter the information to ensure that it's accurate as best we can anyway. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There should be a whole episode on just, how to vet information from, but that's what you're trying to do. And so we appreciate that. So what is the difference? Peer-reviewed and refereed articles or journals or papers. What is the difference? People normally use those interchangeably. Is there a difference between them?
Yes, there is a difference. And the longtime viewers, the listeners of the show have heard me say this before. I don't particularly care about peer-reviewed papers. What I care about is refereed papers. And so I'm really excited to have this show tonight. And actually, this is the first show I've ever actually made notes for, because I don't want to miss any of the information. I've never made notes before. And so I have a sheet of notes here because it's so important to me to get this right as best I can. But peer review is the process where we subject our information or our science or information to other scholars in our field and who are equivalent or maybe even greater knowledge than we have to what we're writing. to have them confirm that the methods are accurate, they're valid, that the results are correct in terms of, what would be expected or what methods you use, and then the conclusions, whether or not they're within the boundaries of the results. They're there to make sure it's all, passes the sniff test, as I've said before. That's peer review.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different, though, from refereed. So what is the difference between the two? The question is, what's the difference between peer review and refereed? Refereed, all refereed papers are peer reviewed. So they've already gone through that peer review process, but refereed papers usually have at least two distinct differences. One is the refereed process generally will have one or more editors along with reviewers that also look at the paper and confirm. Oftentimes they confirm whether or not the content is appropriate for their journal. That's one big step. But beyond that, they look at the reviewers' critiques. They also provide their own critique and determine, these reviewers are in agreement or they're in disagreement, and they also have to provide a review. So there's a third level there. But also then there's a technical editor and an editor-in-chief. So there's a lot more editorial steps that have to be made through to confirm that it's correct. But secondly, the second difference compared to peer review, and which I feel is the major difference between peer review and refereed, is all refereed papers have the probability of being rejected and not being published. That does not exist in all peer-reviewed papers. So, for example, a peer-reviewed paper may be something like you find on a university extension website. Those papers oftentimes have to be peer-reviewed by other faculty in the department. But there's zero chance they're being rejected. They're not going to be rejected. They're going to be published. And one example I can give is there's a paper out for the University of Kentucky, and I won't go into the author or the content, but it was sent to me as a review, and I read the paper that he was going to send out, and I happened to be developing a paper on that exact topic, on the exact data set, just by sheer coincidence. And I recognized that when he was writing the extension publication, that what he wrote technically was correct, but it omitted a large portion of other content that would have contextualized the results in a very different light. In other words, what he said was true, yes, but within the context of the whole picture, what he said in that particular paper had a very different meaning. And so I wrote that to him, and I said, you know what, we need to include all these data if you're going to show that so that it contextualizes it correctly. And totally ignored it. The editor totally ignored it, and it got published the way it is, and totally just completely ignored everything that I said. That's an example of how a peer, being myself, was trying to provide better content to help him get his content more accurate and more contextually accurate. And there was no consideration given to the review from him or the editor, and it was sent through. So that is not a refereed paper. Right. That's an example of how information can be put out through peer review that would not have made it. That same paper would not have made it through a refereed process because you can't just ignore a reviewer in a refereed journal. You can't just ignore their comment, even if it is dot this I and cross this T. If you just ignore it, the editor is going to go, no, you have to refer to the reviewer. You have to acknowledge the reviewer's comment, or they're not going to let it through, as you well know. So that doesn't exist in peer review. So that's the major difference. Peer reviewed are not refereed, and there's no chance of rejection for the most part, whereas refereed are peer reviewed, and they're editorialized as well, and they have a chance of being rejected.
Yeah, so it's an extra level that decides yay or nay, right? Well, I know that process well. I just caught up with all my papers today. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And by the way, what number are you up to? I mean, I only have like maybe 20 or 30 refereed papers. I don't know what the number. Someone can look it up. 20 or 25 paper, whatever the number is. Are you over 100 yet?
No, I just updated my CV the other day. I think it was last week, and I think it's 94, 95, but that doesn't count the review. So maybe close to 100.
Yeah, close to 100. Yeah, we have a no contest competition in our household, and that is who can write the most refereed papers. And there's no contest.
No.
I'll never catch up.
I have lots of great graduate students, so I have to give my kudos to my graduate
students.
Oh yeah,
once you get a pipipeline of graduate students, they start kicking them out.
They are amazing. They are amazing. So if they're listening, thank you. You guys are awesome. All of the ones that pass by my lab, right? There's several. So So I think we covered the refereed process, in the difference of the layers of review, like that.
Hmm.
It's not just a review is not enough, right? Just a peer review is not enough. You have to have two or three, and then you have to have a third, an editor, associate editor, an editor that says,
Yeah.
okay, this is good. This is going to go through.
Yeah.
So a
And there has
refereed
to be,
process is more layered,
yeah, and it has to be able
higher
to be
level.
rejected. I mean, if there's no chance of being
Yeah.
rejection, then why are we doing the review process at all? Who cares? You're not going to reject it anyway. That's the
Well,
disadvantage of a peer review, right?
you know my pet peeves with some of the stories I tell you in
Yeah,
my
no
world.
joke.
So
Yeah.
no joke. So why is this process, Travis? Why is this referee process so important, so central to the credibility of what's put out there and for scientific research as a whole?
Well, essentially, it provides a foundation to protect the integrity of the scientific literature, the scientific model. Essentially, is what it is. It is the best process we have right now to protect the integrity of the scientific model. And I've mentioned this before as a scientist. It's kind of hard to explain on in an hour show. I'm not directly interested in what's true in the scientific sense when I'm doing science. I care about truth and I care about science. I've mentioned that before. That's really all I care about. But when I'm doing a project, I care about doing it correctly. But really, on the back of my mind, I'm thinking about what I care about is contributing to the scientific model. That's what science does. So for a paper
Right.
that you publish or a paper that I publish is almost never going to change the world. Okay. It's going to be one piece of the puzzle that
Once.
contributes to the jigsaw puzzle, the scientific model. Now,
Right.
when I say I don't care about truth in that particular sense, I'm not doing it to figure out necessarily what's true. I'm trying to make sure it's correct and accurate, but I'm more contributing to the scientific model. So the refereed process is making sure that that piece of the puzzle that I put down on the table is oriented correctly, it matches the color, it matches the shape, and it fits that spot, and it's correct as best we can, at least. That's why it's
Yeah.
important, as opposed
And
to
it's
having a shape that we just try to cram in there and get a hammer and smash it in there and trying to cram that. It's not going to fit.
right.
Yeah,
And it's a baby steps, right?
sure.
It's it you say a piece of the puzzle. I call it the baby steps until you will build a whole story,
Yeah,
or you call it the whole puzzle. It's a great
yeah.
analogy. Um, and I think it's very important to add to this to the knowledge, either
Mhm.
adding by confirming. Sometimes they say, "Oh, there's nothing novel there," but it's adding to confirming that the data is actually, or the X, Y, and Z is working well,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Product or treatment approach or whatever. Or it can show a different story. Hey, this paper was it showed that in males was it worked well, but now in females is showing a different story. And I think, for healthcare, it's important. Or in different types of grasses, you show, okay, this product works well for this grass. Now this other paper is showing the same thing, but for this other type of grass doesn't work so well. So I think that's important to build upon the knowledge, and that's what the referee process does too. Is it building on knowledge that we don't know yet,
Yeah.
and is it adding to the field? um One of the comments says, "Reviewer three, number three can make it or break you." I love that because I'm an associate editor, so I have to. Sometimes I get two reviewers, and one of them says reject, and one of them says accept with minor revisions, and I'm like, oh my god, what do I do? I need a third reviewer, and sometimes I don't get the third reviewer, and I have to go fetch it. Right? It's so hard to get people to say yes to you. By the way, it's a hard process, but that's a very good point. And in the grant world, like when we submit grants to be funded, it's the same thing. The reviewer one and two may love it, reviewer three hates it and destroys the whole process. I hear you. So that's a good comment. What mechanisms, Travis, do this reputable journals, the journals that publish the good papers, use then to ensure the quality and prevent weak or biased studies from being published? I mean, obviously, we talked about the referees process. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
can you tell us more about that?
Well, for most refereed papers, it's going to depend on the journal, but for most refereed journals, I should say, they're going to have a double-blind review where I don't know who the reviewer is and the reviewer doesn't know who the author is. Only the editor knows them both. And that provides a little bit of safety or safeguard built in. So as a reviewer, who, as you do too, you get asked to review many, many papers. I want to be professional. I want to be polite. But I also want to be correct and helpful. My job is not to find reasons to reject that paper. My job is to find a manner, a way to make this paper, give the author recommendations on how he can make the best use of this paper, how the paper can be made the strongest as it possibly can be. Now,
Sure.
and in that process, if I find a fatal flaw, there's not much I can do about it. If if your method was flawed from the beginning and there was no hope, then I have to let the editor and the author know, I'm sorry, but this is not the proper method. It's flawed. It's highly erroneous, and you can't use these data. And for that reason, this paper is rejected. So but I can do that with some confidence and with some security because it is a double blind. I don't know who the author was. I can probably figure it out because it says, this study was conducted at the University of Florida or what. I can probably figure it out, but as we all probably can for the most part, I don't worry about that. You just do your best, be respectful, be firm, but do your best. So the double blind review helps. Sometimes journals are single blind where the reviewers know the author, but the author never knows the reviewers and referee process. I've never known a reviewer of all the papers I've submitted. I've never known one reviewer, but occasionally the journal, I want to say maybe agronomy journal is a single blind, but crop science is a double blind. I can't remember, but occasionally I might know the author and I'm happen to be a reviewer. To be frank, I'd rather not know that. But it's really difficult because you got to remove the authors, you got to remove the bylines, you got to remove some of the references, you got to remove all the names. It's really, really difficult to make sure it's completely double blind. But that's one major tool that's put into the referee process is it's a double blind review. There's an editorial process and it has a probability of being rejected. It has a non-zero probability of being rejected, whatever that is.
And that's and I think that's important. But some of our journals are not; they're single blinded, but not double, because they say, well, if this person is doing this, and they have to say the IRB of the University of blah, and then we end up knowing who the authors are.
Yeah.
So, most of the time. So there is a very good comment that or a question in there that I'd love you to address. At what point, and I'm sorry I can't read the name of it.
His name's Ashanti. He was the first host. He was the host 2 days ago.
Yes, he hosted. Yeah, he did a good job. I have to live up to him. At what point does citing more reputable referee journals stop being evidence-based and start becoming an appeal to authority? And that is such a good point.
Yeah. So it is a good point. So when I'm appealing to an authority, okay, there's a difference. This is just the reason I've said I don't believe there is an authority. There are no authorities. There's only scholars or experts or specialists. But if I'm appealing to an authority in an argument, I'm saying that this is the case because Travis said so. I would say, let's take something I've done. Only I've done. Say urea is the least expensive nitrogen source. I think I'm the only one that's published on that. So if you stand up, Ashani, and you say, urea is the least expensive nitrogen source because Travis said so, that's an appeal to authority. If you say urea as nitrogen, the least expensive nitrogen source is urea, Shattuck's 2021, that's not an appeal to authority. You're simply referencing a publication that determined that was true after following the scientific method. That's not an appeal to an authority. That is a reference to a specialist who found that was the case. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it definitely means you're not appealing to an authority. But I can't say that aggressive periodontitis is 100% DNA based or whatever. I'm trying to speak your language, Lou, but because Luciana Shattuck said so, I can't say that. That is an appeal to an authority. But if I say Shattuck's 2018 found that then that's simply citing the scientific literature and not an appeal to an authority. Okay.
Yeah, and I view that also in a different context is probably because I'm in the other side of the journals, right? And looking at the reviews, and we do have to really pay attention to the good evidence and to the good reviews do. Like
Hmm.
if the reviewer has a good point of this is a flawed methodology or not, and be careful with those reviewers that are appealing to the authority of the author
Hmm.
and saying this paper is amazing. And I've had
That happens a
situations
lot.
like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Well, this paper is amazing, and then these people that did a great job, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, wait a minute, did you
Yeah.
review the paper? And then there's some others that says, no, this has a flaw X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. So regardless of the authority of the authors, we
Hmm.
have to be evidence based and follow a
Yeah.
good methodology in
Yeah,
the
and
review process.
I'll give you an example of what you're talking about. I was reviewing a paper a couple years ago, and there was a question about some statistics in this particular paper. Now, I'm not a statistician, but I knew enough to know there wasn't something quite right about this particular methodology. And
Mhm.
so I sent it back and I said, this, you might want to check this. I don't know if this is accurate. And the author wrote back something rather terse and said, this is correct because I won't use the guy's name, but this is correct because Joe Bob said so. Basically is what he said. And I'm like, no. That's not going to fly. Okay. So then what I did was I happened to know Joe Bob.
Joe Bob.
I know
Yeah.
him as a colleague. And so I called him and I said, and this was a real situation. I called Joe Bob and I said, Joe, so-and-so is saying this. Can you help me understand? And he goes, no, that's not the case. That's not what I said. That's not what I wrote. Here's the paper. And so we went back and forth. So that author was appealing to an authority who I happened to know. And as a reviewer, I thought it was in my authority to reach out to him to make sure, is this correct?
That's
And
good.
come to find out it wasn't correct. And that's the case. That's a perfect case where this author was appealing to an authority. When I went and actually asked the authority, the author had it completely wrong. When you actually look at that authority's or that scholar's work and his published evidence, what he published was
Said
not
no.
what the author said. So
He
it does happen.
misinterpreted. He
Yeah,
probably misinterpreted what he published.
it does
And that's good.
happen. Yeah.
I wish all reviewers were as good as you. Can you review for my journal?
No,
It's
if
like,
you
I
pay me,
mean,
only if
you
you pay me some money. I don't do it. I get review requests now because people see the channel. Some other editors and authors see what I do on the channel, and so I get a lot more requests now. And so I'm happy to do those. But I also get a lot of requests from predatory journals, which is what we're going to skip to here real quick. And I don't ever review for predatory journals, but I'd like to skip to that ahead actually right
oh,
now because
let's
there's
do that.
yeah,
Let's talk about predatory journals then.
yeah.
Thanks for the link. That what is a predatory journal? Like what
So
defines it,
yeah,
and how has it become so common
yeah.
lately?
Yeah. So if you ask 15 authors and editors and reviewers, what is a predatory journal? They're going to give you a kind of a general answer that's going to be somewhat consistent, but there's not a definition. There's not like, this is a predatory journal. And it has a big neon sign that says we're a predator. And that doesn't exist. But in general, predatory journals are going to have a few things in common. They're almost always open access, which is not,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean open access is predatory, but all predatory journals are open access for the most part. I don't know any that are not, but I'm pretty sure all of them are. They are going to place a higher priority on revenue and profit than in the quality of the content. The issue is, how do you know that? How do you know that that's
Yeah.
the priority of the journal? They don't sit around and have a meeting with all the authors and say, yep, we're interested in money. Just send us your journals and just pay us money and we'll publish. They don't have those meetings. But unfortunately, the only way you're really going to have a good deal of confidence on whether a journal is predatory or not is to be an author or to be an editor and go through the process and understand, submission to that journal or being a reviewer for that journal and experiencing that. And you quickly realize, wait a second, this editor didn't even consider, nor did the author even consider my review comments, which were very reasonable. And they still let it through. Okay, that happens even with good journals. Okay, no problem. Then the same journal comes by and you notice, I'm sorry, but this is a fatal flaw. You're going to have to go back and maybe redo this year or use a different instrument. This isn't valid. And the journal still lets it through. I'm like, wait a second. This is
Yeah.
a predatory journal and they're not interested in the quality of the content. They're interested in
Right.
the quantity of the content and the revenue that it generates. And I think one way, well, that we'll get into this in a minute, but that it's hard to define what a predatory journal is, but those are some commonalities. They're almost all open access and they're interested in the revenue rather than the quality of the content. The contributing to the scientific model is not their highest priority.
and it's become so crazily common recent, and we're so afraid of the capitalism behind it. It's
Yeah.
really a powerful source.
It, it,
So
it
how can go ahead?
no, how can we what? Go ahead.
So how can a researcher or a curious reader out there, one of your listeners, if they
Hmm.
want to read a journal, how can they identify some red flags that a journal may be predatory or unreliable?
Yeah, well, and that's the difficult question to answer. What I would say, open access, usually very, very fast review processes. If they can turn it around in a week or two, that's usually a red flag. Like, well, hold on.
Are they
Like,
doing the right thing?
you know,
Right.
did that really go through some scholars that are at my level or greater? Are they really reviewing my process? Because now later in my career, as you probably are as well, I'm very different than I was early in my career. The papers that I put out now, I don't care about putting out 5 papers a year like I used to, 6 papers a year like I used to. And I'm good for you if you do that. What I care about is making the greatest impact that I can and that my paper is fiercely reviewed. I want to make sure as best I can that the content is accurate. And that's not going to happen with a review that happens in a week. Okay. And the predatory journals will oftentimes have an extremely rapid turnaround time, very
Yeah.
fast, a week or two. And again, that doesn't mean just because it does that it's predatory, but that can be a red flag. The open access can be a red flag. Extremely high impact factors can be, not always, but can be a red flag. Like, for example, PLS1 used to have an impact factor of like 13 or 12 or something, extremely high because they're putting out so many publications and they're getting so many citations of their work because the journal is growing so much and it's all open access so everybody can read it. So there's a couple little things that you can keep an eye on, but the best thing as a scholar, if you're writing and reviewing, the best thing you can do is actually just be a part of the process. And over time, you'll get a feel for which journals are predatory and which ones aren't. Unfortunately, that means the average person reading the journals is not going to be, it's not going to be easy for them to identify which ones are not and which ones are. But I do have a list tonight that I'm going to go over. So I'm going to name some turfgrass journals that I feel are predatory and which ones are valid.
Well, let's get into it. What are some examples of legitimate,
Yeah.
good-looking journals that have, that reference journals that are reliable and ones that are
Yeah.
not so
So,
reliable?
so if you go to like in my world, I'm a soil and turfgrass scientist. In the worlds of nematology, there's nematologists, and there's nematology journals, or there's weed science journals, or there's disease journals. And those journals that the top scholars publish in, they're going to be members of those societies. For example, the Journal of Nematology is going to be a top journal in the world of nematology. I say that, I've never published, but I see a lot of journal or articles published by top scholars in that journal. Same thing with things like weed science or weed technology. Those are journals of the Weed Science Society of America. So those are going to be good quality journals in journals that I've never published in. But when I go and I listen to their talks, they're publishing in those journals. The authors that I know that are quality authors and quality papers they write are in those journals. So in the world of my world in soils and turf, I'm just going to go down the list. The number one, number two science journals in turfgrass, which almost no one ever gets published in. I would say there's probably 15 journal articles in both of these journals combined and related to turfgrass. There's not many, and that's Nature and Science. If you can get your article in Nature Journal or in Science Journal, those are at the very, very top of the list.
Yeah.
But almost no one ever gets published in there. Why? Because the review process is so robust and so stringent that you have to have everything completely accurate. And I mean, it is extremely difficult because it is so filtered and so tight with the accuracy of the content. So Nature and Science,
super cutting edge science too, right?
it has to be modern. It has to be new. It has to, all these things. There's it's very difficult to get published in those journals, but if you do, good for you. And there are some there's some turfgrass articles in those journals. But very, very few. I think there's some, I won't name the authors, but there's some good authors in those journals. But the number one journal that turfgrass scientists aspire to publish in is Crop Science. That's the flagship journal of the Crop Science Society of America. Agronomy Journal is the flagship journal of Agronomy Society of America. Soil Science Society of America Journal, Soil Science Society of America Journal or Association, and then Journal of Environmental Quality are all top tier journals. Okay. Then that's all from the ASA, the CSSSA, and then the SSAAJ, the Social Science of America Journal. Those are all the Tri-Society journals. Top tier. That's what we almost all aspire to publish in, along with JEQ, Journal of Environmental Quality. Then there's the Horticultural Science Societies, the ASHS, the American Society of Horticultural Science.org, ASHS.org. Their journals are things like Hort Science, Hort Technology. Those are quality journals. Now, there's a little, well, Hort Science is good. Hort Technology is a little bit of a step down, but they're all refereed, reputable journals, the Hort Science, the Hort Technologies, and so forth. Then you can go to what is a newer impact factor journal called the Crop Forage and Turfgrass Management, what used to be called Applied Turfgrass. I wouldn't really put that in the same tier as crop science. And that's not even remotely close to crop science, but it is at least refereed and reviewed by top turfgrass scientists. So anything in crop forage and turfgrass management, I would have a fair amount of confidence that it's correct. It just might not necessarily be as robust of a study, but the journal is solid. Okay. So those are 10 journals or so that you can rely upon. Now, there's many others, Geoderma, and there's all sorts of other, journals that are very qualified and very good journals. Those are just a handful of turf journals. The predatory journals, the ones you want to steer away from, or at least I shouldn't say steer away from. That's not the wrong word. The ones you want to be very, very careful with, because just because it's in any of the journals I mentioned doesn't mean it's true. And it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that my confidence is pretty high if it's in one of those journals, that the content's going to be pretty sound. Now, as you all know, I've critiqued heavily many articles that are in some of those journals because they're just complete junk articles. It's awful articles, but not many. There's not many. There's only a handful of all the hundreds and hundreds of articles I've gone over. There's only a handful that are in those journals that were bad. Now, you go down to some of these other journals, and that's a whole nother thing, okay? For example, any journal that's in the MDPI family of journals, namely agronomy or plants or grasses, those are all predatory. And there are good authors that write okay papers that are in those journals. I'm not saying that the paper is bad, but the journal itself is highly, highly predatory. And because of that, and because I've refereed and reviewed for those journals, I know the process. I don't have much confidence at all in the content that's in those journals. I have to read those very carefully and make sure that what I'm reading fits with the model of science as I know it, as opposed to crop science. I still have to read it that way, but I don't have my guard up as much. I'm reading it a little bit looser. Okay, so that's MDPI journals. International Turfgrass Society Research Journal, a lot of people like to cite that. A lot of top-tier authors and a lot of papers go into the ITSRJ because it's published every 4 years, and you have to get published in that in order to actually present at the meeting. It was in New Jersey 4 years ago, then it was in Japan just this last summer, and then next year it's going to be in Guelph in Canada, or 4 years from now it'll be in Guelph in Canada. So it moves around every 4 years. And you can't go to that and present unless you publish. And in the ITSRJ, the International Turf Science and Research Journal, that is a predatory journal. However you want to slice it up, it has no impact factor. It has essentially no chance of ever being rejected when you submit it to it. Whatever you submit to it, they're almost always going to accept it. That, by definition, is a predatory journal. It doesn't mean the articles are bad. It doesn't mean that. It just means that, I better be careful when I'm reading these things, okay? Got to be real careful. Right. As we move through it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are some good papers that come out on these ones, right? But there are some also some bad papers that come out on good journals as well.
Absolutely.
So you have to be careful with the science as you read it. Let's talk a little bit about impact factor. Can we use impact factor citation counts when deciding to trust a journal or a paper? How do you feel about those?
It's a metric, Lou. I'm not real sold on the impact factor number. Our top journal in crops in soils and turf has a 2.2 or 2 point crop science. Someone can look it up and put it in the chat. It's like 2.2 or 2.3 impact factor. It's awful. It's low. The worst journal in your field might have a 2. I mean, so your journals are up in the 7s and the 8s, or even higher in some cases. So, our best journal has a 2. Our worst journal might have a 1.4, 1.5. So they're not separated out that far. I mean, so it's not something that I don't put a lot of confidence or weight in the impact factor. Now, having said that, I do, in my own personal filter, require an impact factor in order for me to consider it into the scientific model. That's the reason I don't consider anything in the ITSRJ as in the scientific model, because it doesn't have an impact factor. It's not published enough to actually be included in the scientific model. If it's good enough to be included in the scientific model, don't put it in the ITSRJ. Put it in crop science. Put it in the agronomy journal. Put it in soil science. Put it in JEQ. They just throw anything they can in the ITSRJ to get a trip to go to wherever they're going. They got to pay for it, but to go. So I don't put a lot of confidence in the impact factor. It is a metric. I mean, it can be some reliability put on that. I understand that. All things being equal, I would rather publish in a higher impact factor journal. What that means basically is the number of articles that are published relative to the number of articles in that journal that are cited. So it gives the reader an idea as to how reputable that journal probably is, because a lot of people are citing articles in that journal relative to the number of articles that are published in the journal. I get that, but it's not always what it's cracked up to be. For example, PLOS 1, Public Level Library of Science 1, which I call POS 1, used to have extremely high impact factor. And you read that and go, holy cow, impact factor is like 14 at one point. I think now it's down to like 7 or 8 or something, whatever it is now. But you look at that and go, man, I'm going to publish in that thing. And then you go do it and you go, holy cow, these reviewers are not scholars in my field. They don't know what they're talking. They might be scholars in their own field, but not in my field. And they don't need to be reviewing my papers. And so I don't ever review for PLS 1. I always reject those reviews. In fact, I got a review request last week, and it's no offense to the authors. I have no problem with the authors who asked me to review. I understand that you see me and I review a lot of papers. I get that. But I do not review for PLS 1. I don't review for agronomy. I don't review for any MDPI journals. I don't contribute to the success of those journals because I'm not convinced that they're necessary, and I'm actually convinced that they actually harm our discipline rather than help our discipline. So I don't contribute to those.
There was one question about what is MDPI in the chat. I don't know what that is either.
MDPI journals. I can't even remember what the acronym stands for. MDPI is, I don't know, MDPI, what does it stand for?
That's news to me too, so.
Multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute.
Okay.
A Switzerland-based publisher of open access scientific journals, books, conferences, and proceedings. It's a predatory system is what it is. And as are things like the frontier journals, Frontiers in Agronomy, Frontiers in Earth Science, Frontiers in Environmental Science, Frontiers in Horticulture, all that. Yeah. All the frontier journals are all predatory. PLS 1 is predatory. Peer J, which is the only journal that MLSN, those listeners of the channel know MLSN, the Minimum Level of Sustainable Nutrition. The only journal that it's ever published in was Peer J, and that's a predatory journal. It's going to get published one way or the other. That's the reason I don't include it into the scientific model, the MLSN. Nature communications, any of the nature communications are going to have very high impact factors. So Lou, this is an example where I don't put a lot of weight in impact factor. Any of the frontiers of the nature communications are going to have high impact factors, but those are all predatory. They're going to publish anything they can to get their numbers up and to get as much revenue in as they can. It doesn't mean the article is bad. It just means the journal is predatory in nature, and you got to be real careful.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's something to be said about impact factors on open access journals because they're more accessible to people all over the world, and they tend to be probably cited more because of that. Could be they need to take into consideration the times of views and times of sites and all that. So I think there's something to be said there, and I agree with you on the impact factor. We have to take it with a grain of salt. For the average person out there trying to make sense of all this and of the science online, that what's available to them, what simple steps can they take to verify if a journal or paper is credible?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, you can go down the whole web of science. What do they call that? The web of science, or PubMed or web of science. There's some libraries that'll kind of note some better journals. But I've thought about that question a lot. If it's hard for me to kind of have to like separate myself from my mind and think like imagine I didn't know anything about science. I didn't know anything about publishing or nothing. How would I know that this journal is bad? That's a hard
Mm,
question to answer when you think about it, Lou. Imagine you didn't know
yep.
anything. You've never published, you've never reviewed, you've never read a paper. You're going to be handed a journal and you're going to read it and you're going to go, I didn't know that. Well, it might be true. It might not be true. How would you know? It's not easy. The truth takes some effort. You're going to
Yeah.
have to find a specialist in that field, like myself in soil fertility, like Lou in periodontology, like any
Right.
weed biologists, and you got to find a nematologist and say, well, you might have to email them. It's like, well, what associations are you a member of, and what journals are reputable in your area? I don't know how to determine it if I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about science.
Yeah, I think simple things is, I mean, impact factor is one clue. Peer reviewed referee is another clue. How fast the turnaround of the papers. If you
Yeah.
go to on the about the journal on the website of the journal, so we
Mm-hmm.
go to the about section, and then it gives you some metrics, and how fast the review is too. You mentioned that. But yeah, so you look at the science. If I don't know anything about orthodontics, for instance, I would go to my colleague at work and say, "Hey, what do you think about this journal? Is this okay? Because I found
Yeah.
this article and I found it interesting, but
Well,
I'm wary of it, you know."
yeah.
So
Well, we do that in
yeah,
science. Yeah.
that's what I
I
would do.
may like,
Yeah,
I'll be doing a project. In fact, I had this conversation just with a publication I just did with Dr. Soldat. We had a conversation on the phone. I was like, well, where do we want to publish this? I'm thinking about Soil Science of America. And he goes, well, I'm thinking about crop science or whatever. We had a conversation about it. If it ever came up where it got rejected, we'd come back, he and I would come back and I'd go, well, we'd have a conversation. Well, where do we want to resubmit it? Where
what's
do,
the next? Yeah.
but we would have to go 10, 15 journals down before either one of us considered a predatory journal. It would be, I probably would just leave it on the shelf. I wouldn't even submit it to a predatory journal, honestly. But we have those
Yeah, I
conversations
mean,
internally about, well, what is a good journal? Where's a good fit for this paper? Where am I going to get the most exposure and simultaneously receive a fair review and referee process?
the conversation I have with my students is this: if it's not good enough, do you even want to submit it? Even if it's
Yeah,
for a lower tier journal, why would you want your name associated with something that's not that great?
yeah,
You want to put out good stuff. When
yeah,
people cite it, it's going to be, oh, Dr. Shaddix did this and that, right?
yeah, yeah,
So it's like maybe we add some more data to it and make it better, and then we go for a better journal, right?
yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah,
my take on that.
ultimately, I'm doing this work because I want to help society. I want to help people's
Sure.
well-being, and in order to do that, I got to get it in front of people to read it. So I want to get it exposed to as many people as possible. But you can do that with any predatory journal. Me, as an ethical scientist, I want to do that, but I want to do that through the referee process, not because I just want to get the information out, but because I want to get the correct and true information out as accurate as I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the step that a lot of us young professors skip because these predatory journals they prey on junior faculty
On
because
junior faculty.
junior faculty, the metric is not did you have one article in Nature which has like an impact factor of like whatever 15 or something high, something crazy. It's how many articles did you get? So if you have 8, let's say you're at a TMP meeting, Lou, and you say, okay, you're looking at a pack. Well, not you, but the average person would say,
Right.
okay, here's an author who has 25 publications going up for an associate professor. All of them are in predatory journals, or they have 2 publications, one in Nature and one in Science. I'd be looking at the Nature and Science author, but
Sure.
but the system is set up to look at the 25 from predatory journals.
But that's why you need
You know,
peer review
yeah.
letters of promotion, right?
Well,
So
no,
the
I
peer
understand. I
review.
understand that, but
Yeah,
that's how these predatory journals continue to function because the
I
assistant
know.
professor. I shouldn't say all assistant professors because some full professors do it too, but generally junior faculty feel pressure to publish as many as they can, and to do that quickly requires usually a predatory
Right.
journal or type of predatory journal to get that done. It's unfortunate.
So we talked about a little bit about how do we get into these things. So let's take a few minutes here and take a look at some questions from the
Okay.
audience and see. I know that there was some talk about double blind
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah. I'll go back and see if
Um,
I can what I can find. Um, Yeah. Carpet Bomber says Travis has notes. This is serious business.
I
For those
saw
people,
that.
I get emails every now and then. They'll say, "You have whatever videos I have. You have 300 videos or 600 videos. You should have 100,000 subscribers. You need to do this, 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 and this." And I go, "Guys, I'm way too late." Not my members. It's usually like marketers, like YouTube marketers send me email. I'm not even replying. Like, I'm too lazy to do all that stuff that you're supposed to do. What I do is get on and just speak live. I don't read by notes. Okay. I don't read off a script. And good for those people that do that. They have huge channels. I'm not wired that way. So when I get notes, I'm like, this is like bizarre to me. I'm sitting there looking at these notes and going, okay, all right, I don't want to miss that. Don't want to miss that. But my mind, anyway, whatever. So yeah, it's pretty serious when I got notes. That's for sure.
It's a good topic, though. It's a good topic. So maybe that's
here's
why.
MC Drugi. He says, Medical Essays and Observations, the first fully peer-reviewed journal, was launched by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Okay, yeah. So there was a journal, can't remember the name of it now, but there was a journal like in 1660s or something like that first came out, but it wasn't peer-reviewed. It was like the first sort of journal. But then they quickly realized we need to have some sort of system to function to make sure the information is correct. Right. So if that sounds about the right timing there, MC Drugi. Yeah.
There is a comment before that says 1665 something, and I missed it. I'm sorry. That before that
here we
comment, go. Somebody said
journal
1665.
Was published in Paris in 1665 as disseminated information and connect with scholars. The journal's founder and first editor, Jean-Denis Dessalles, described the purpose of the journal as making known the experiments in physics and chemistry, which may serve to explain the effects of nature and new discoveries made in arts and science. Yeah, 1660. I think that's the right. I don't know if that's the journal, but it must be, because that date is in the back of my head for some reason. 1665 being the first sort of official sort of journal when you look back in the history.
That's interesting. Physics and chemistry. They were quick.
But even then, it's amazing. Even then, 1665, we're trying to get out truthful information. Even then, they were flooded by nonsense and BS. So they had to figure out some way to filter the BS even 400 years ago. It's amazing. It's ridiculous. Chuck Benzing. Chuck Benzing is one of the best members we got. He donates so many members, Lou. You have no idea. I think last week, he donated like 10 memberships. Unbelievable.
Yes, I saw that. Thanks, Chuck. That's really nice. I've seen him donate.
Yeah, he says.
Gifting you this.
Yeah, he says, does double blind only apply to the review process or also the study experiment? Well, only the review process. However, studies and experiments can be possibly double blind if it's going in for grants or federal grants or state grants. There's a review process, which Lou sits on many boards for that process, where there is a review of the experiment. But Chuck, that's almost exclusively for federal or tax money that's allotted for grants. So a grant review would be a double-blind study or an experimental review. But for me, if I don't generally apply for federal grants, if I'm going to do a study or an experiment, that doesn't require a review. Now, I do that with my co-authors, because what's going to happen is I'm going to go submit that for publication, and it's going to be reviewed then, and it better be right, because if it's not right then, the study's already over and I can't fix it, right? So I need to make sure that the study in the experiment is correct, and I do that oftentimes. Yeah. Well, at this stage of my career, I pretty much know how to do it, but if it's something, perfect example is today. There's a study going on right now, a multi-state study, and I know there's no interaction between locations, but I also know in order to merge those together, it has to be done in a very specific statistical model. So I called a co-author and I said, hey, can I get a statistician, your statistician on the phone to help me with this code so that I can get the model built correctly? So that would be an example of me making sure the study and experiment is correct, because although it's not double blinded and reviewed, it's going to be at some point if I'm going to get it published. So I need to make sure it's right.
Well, I don't know if they also mean the double blind process of the experiment itself. Like in healthcare, we have those a lot. So like we have a drug and we don't know what drug we're giving to the patient, and the patient doesn't know what drug they're receiving. That's a double blind experimental study.
Okay.
When the investigator doesn't know what drug or what treatment the patient is, and so the patients also don't know. That's a double blind.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, Lou. Yeah, you're right.
Experimental. Yeah.
That's what I would do in Fort Lauderdale when I was doing turf quality studies. I would have my technician, Karen, give me the blank sheet. And I didn't know what the treatments were. And I would go out and rate the plots just on a piece of paper.
Right.
So that would be an example of a double blind. I didn't know what plots were there. I didn't know what treatments were on what plots, and I'm rating them completely blind,
Completely not knowing.
yet not knowing what's what, and that's critical. So if that's what you're asking, Chuck, then yes,
Yes.
that there are parts of the study that are double blinded, and the whole intent is to remove bias. And I posted a video in the Facebook group just a day or two ago from Professor Dave Explains, where he's talking about the bias of the mind and explaining how the mind plays tricks on you and how you perceive information. And the whole purpose of the scientific process, including double-blind studies and experiment, is to minimize the human interaction and bias that can be weaved in to the results.
To the results, to the ratings in your case, or or like if I'm examining a patient and I know he received the treatment, then I'm hoping it works, right?
We got to ask this. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That's
This
okay.
is a very important question. Wilson online did not know what he's asking when he asked this question, but I'm going to bring it right here. It is. You can read it.
Do you have a channel on dental care? We need one. I totally agree. I was just talking to Travis about this. Last month, we went to a task force design and analysis that I'm part of, and the topic was communication of science. And I proposed that to the group, and we brought amazing communication science. And I wanted Travis to come in and talk to us about how he communicates science through an online channel. And I think we definitely need one. I don't have one, but I think we need one. We're desperately needing one. I don't know if you hear about all the oral health crisis we're in and the science crisis we're in. So we definitely need good science out there for dental care for sure. So I will consider that.
I'm trying. MC or Wilson you didn't know, but I've been trying to get her to do that, and her one of her friends out in California to do this, and they both want to do it. But the problem is, like as I've mentioned before in the show, not just with the ladies, but with any scholar, we're so busy doing all this other stuff. Who has the time to sit down for an hour and do this on YouTube? I mean, it's not that you don't want to do it. You know you need to do it, but it's just how you going to find. You can't have 26 hours in the day, So it's one of those things where you have to make it a priority. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to get the ladies, to do exactly what I'm doing here, but do it in the world of dentistry. I think it'd be a lot of value to that.
I told them, I said, I work 8 to 5. When I get home, I just want to be home. I just want to be with my kids and my husband and go to bed at a decent time, Then you have to weave in the house and the workout and everything else. I mean, and when do you find time to do it all is the question. Anyway, I love to do it though.
Yeah. Let me. Yeah.
So
let me ask this question. I mean, Giorgi asked another question. I don't know if I want to make sure I get the members' questions, especially when they're highlighted. It says Q scores, if scores. Google Scholar also rates based on citations to look at impact. The journals with the higher quality tend to have articles with higher ratings. Yeah, well, I don't know if you're asking a question there, MC Giorgi, or not, but basically, there are metrics that can oftentimes be related to the quality of the journal. This is true. I'm just saying I personally don't put a lot of weight in the impact factor. There's things, what's the other ones? What's the other one? H index.
Authors, right?
There's other metrics that can be used. There's other metrics that can be used, but I just wouldn't put a whole lot of confidence in this journal has this number, therefore it's more reliable than the other journal. There's probably some truth to that. I will say that, but I wouldn't go too far. I wouldn't have too much confidence in that.
One of the comments says, use the graduate students that for the channel. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to use that. Girls, you're going to do this now for me. I love it. Thank you for the encouragement. I need it. I think that it's time for us to tell me update on your upcoming appearances that we mentioned this month. You're going to be gone for a couple of weeks. Tell us where you're going at projects or publications you want to share with us.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be, next week, a week from tomorrow, November 12th, I'll be out in Salt Lake City, and I'll be talking on November 12th. I think it's, I want to say like 9 a.m. on the economics and agronomic impact of soil test philosophies for turfgrass out at the ASA, the Tri-Society meeting in Salt Lake City. And then directly after that talk, literally on the same stage, I'll be giving an additional talk. I've never done this before, on the correlation and calibration of Malic 3 sulfur for Kentucky bluegrass, which is the study that this channel funded. The members of this channel and the donors of
That's
the
great.
GoFundMe actually help fund. I'll be discussing that in Utah. And if just on that note, if you were interested in supporting turfgrass research, you can be a member of the channel. You can go to GoFundMe.com and then just search up turfgrass, and you'll find Turfgrass Epistemology there. And then the following week, which is one reason why I'll be gone for a little while, is right when I come back from Utah, I turn around and go to Pennsylvania on November 19th at University Park, Pennsylvania. I'll be speaking at the Golf Turf Conference. And on the 19th, I'll be speaking on soil test interpretation and application, and that's going to be fun. Okay, I gave this talk about 2 years ago in Daytona, and it was fantastic. And this particular talk, I've added in Pennsylvania-specific soil data maps. So those people that are going to be there on the 19th, I think it's the 19th, they'll be looking at specific to Pennsylvania by county, the maps of phosphorus and potassium and average calcium levels and pH levels by county. And I'll be talking about soil test interpretations based upon your specific situation there in Pennsylvania. And then the next day on November 20th, I'll be discussing nutrient best management practices. And so in that talk, I'll be talking about more like nitrogen applications and phosphorus and potassium applications, what you should and shouldn't consider and so forth, those sorts of things, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention before I go is that the GCSAA right now has the nutrient survey open. And I keep forgetting to mention, but please, if you're a golf course superintendent listening to this, the nutrient survey, this is November 4th, 2025. It's going to be open for the next week or two only. And if you go in, you're going to get some GCSA points, but you will contribute to the nutrient survey that we do about every 5 years that provides some insight as to where our numbers are moving relative to best management practices and relative to time over years and so forth. So that's the Nutrient and Pest Management Survey. You can go to gcsa.org. If you're a member, you can go in and log in and do the survey. Or you can check your email. You're getting it from the GCSA, and you might be getting it from the NGF and National Golf Foundation. So please, 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 we are running a little bit low this year. We need to get a minimum number of surveys in for the regions and for the United States to have a valid survey. And right now we're below that number. We need to get the numbers up. So please, if you're listening to this, I want to say it takes about 15 or 20 minutes to sit down and go through the nutrient survey and go through the pest survey. We've done our best to condense it down so it's not taking so much of your time. It's a little easier to answer than it was in the past. We've removed some questions, made them a little easier. So please do your part and help out by contributing to those data if you can, please. That would mean a whole lot to the NGF and the GCSA and myself. Okay.
Perfect.
Was there something else that I wanted to mention?
Somebody mentioned that whenever they see your flyer of talks, it reminds them of Star Wars, a movie poster.
Oh yeah.
Travis is a fan of Star Wars, so maybe I don't know if you had that intention in mind, but that's a good one. I just want to mention it. All right, Travis, can we summarize what we talked about today?
Yeah. So we've talked about journals, the difference between peer-reviewed journals, referee journals, and predatory journals. And we've discussed about how they came about, the importance of those, why that exists in our society. We've talked about the risks of predatory journals. Just because an article is in a predatory journal doesn't mean that it's not true or it's flawed. And just because it's in a really, really good journal doesn't mean that it is. But it's important to read those journals, the articles in those journals, with a little bit more caution based upon what journal it's in. And I basically made an argument tonight that predatory journals should be a lower priority. You need to be real careful when you're reading those articles. You need to be careful when you're reading top journals as well. But there's a difference between those. I don't care a whole lot about peer review. I care more about refereed papers because of the robust nature of the review process and its ability to protect against flaws being introduced into the scientific model.
Perfect. That's very great. So with that amazing summary, thank you so much for your time. That is all we have for this episode today. It's been a pleasure for me to be here today. I hope we'll come back and we talk about some other scientific things. Hope you all have a great night. And thank you for turning into Turfgrass Epistemology. I have a problem with that word. And I hope you have a great night. And I hope to see you soon. Good night, everyone.